5 years of personal development, working with psychologists, ayahuasca, mushroom ceremonies, men's groups, retreats, coaches who train Fortune 500 C-suites, being mentored then by a Jungian analyst, and now working one-to-one with guys for the past 2 years. And today I am going to be breaking down why men, capable men who have six-figure salaries, nice places, a partner who have pretty much ticked every box on paper, still can't move on the goals that matter to them outside of particular structures that are in their lives. So this could be the business that they've had this idea to go after, that they haven't had it in them to actually make the move in it. It could be that next stage in their career and what that means for them. Or it could even be the fitness. It could be the fitness goal. I've worked with guys who've fallen off the bandwagon with their fitness time and time again. And this is the first of a series where I'm going to be using real client case studies to show you what I've seen over and over again. And one thing I've noticed is that it's the psyche, the modern man's psyche isn't built on frameworks. It's built developmentally. And there are three foundational structures that you have to be aware of in order to understand what's actually going on inside you, so that you can create discernment and detachment and separate yourself from these structures that run autonomously. In Jungian psychology, they are called complexes. And the two parental complexes is what makes you you. And then from that, you develop what's called an ego complex. And that's your I. It's the modern man's own center. But due to the upbringing of most modern men now, where there has been some form of disruption, then they've never really separated themselves from what's called the parental complexes within their psyche. And so because of it, they've never built their own internal authority, their own center, and they really struggle to go after the things that they genuinely want. So in the first of this series, I'm just breaking down these complexes. I'm breaking down these psychological structures that either keep you stuck or just hold you back in general when it comes to accomplishing the goals you want to go, when it comes to building and going after the life that you genuinely want. Okay, so guys, before we get into the meat of the video, this is based off my book, Unbound, A Man's Guide to Ending Destructive Patterns, Reclaiming His Inner Authority, and Living Life on His Own Terms, which you can download for free underneath the video. The link is below. Now, in this picture, you're going to see it. You see the mother is underneath, the father is on top, and then what emerges from that is the I. This is the first part of every man's psychological development. It happens before he can speak, before he has a say, before he's old enough to know anything is happening. And how this development happens shapes everything after. Get it right, and the man has a solid I. He has a solid center, and he is, what I noticed is psychological backing of his own, the internal authority of who he is, what he wants, and the ability to endure hardship that comes with the process of going after, and this is important, a meaningful goal, a goal that is truly his. This way the goal holds, and he has the ability to pull himself out of a dip, that he can hold and maintain steadiness. Get it wrong, and then his own center is porous. There is no psychological backing of his own, no internal authority of this is what he wants, no ability to endure the hardship that comes with the process. So the goals stall, and he's very good at building structures or building lives within structures that is very much, you just do what I'm telling you to do. So that's why they're very good at building great careers. And the second one, due to the nature of society we have now, where single-led families are more common than ever, and even in present two family-led families, there's a lot of external stress going on, where maybe the father and the mother may not have the understanding of what's actually being developed in the young boy. So that's where most modern men are at. That's where most of the guys I work with are. They haven't had that development process happen, where the psychological backing, their own inner authority has been developed within them. So let's go through each of these structures first, so you have a basic understanding of them. The mother complex. This isn't about your actual mother. It's just every man has a mother complex within them. He has a structure in his psyche which is shaped partly by her, your mom, and partly by the wider feminine field in which the man grew up in. What this holds in his psyche is the man's relationship to comfort, to soothing, to his own inner world, and his capacity to feel and hold feelings in his own life. If you think of the film Failure to Launch, Matthew McConaughey, he plays Trip, a 35-year-old man with a good job, plenty of charm, and no apparent reason not to be living on his own, but he still lives with his parents. His mum makes his bed, he does the washing, cooks him breakfast, and the running joke of the whole film is that like he self-sabotages his moves with women. The moment a woman starts to want anything real from him, he brings her home to meet his parents so that he can introduce them to the idea that he still lives at home. And the important thing about this, when he was building the life he wanted to build, he was once engaged and he launched briefly, and then his fiance died, which is hardship. Obviously, we do not want to wish that on anyone, but his immediate thing was to regress and move back into the comfort and not leave that comfort again. And once he got back inside, every woman that was calling him to take on the challenge of his own life, he sabotaged the entire thing. The mother complex can show up in many different forms in the man's psyche, but one of the most common ones across all of them is that when he has not individuated, when that process has not happened where the father has come in and individuated him and basically taking him into reality of life, away from comfort, then oftentimes when it comes to the goals and when it comes to the big things that he really wants to go after, and a hardship or something happens, he finds himself regressing back into comfort instead of taking on the challenge of what that may be. This could mean regressing back into binge eating or snacking when you're on that fitness journey and you've gotten to a point where you're almost there and then you fall back or fall off the rails altogether. This could be never really leaving that friend group that you've actually outgrown by about 5 years. It could also mean setting up a business but having it very much in hobby mode rather than actually going on and taking on the responsibility. Whatever it is, what I've noticed is the goal gets hard, a voice arrives or some form of pull into comfort happens, and the work demands the man to face the reality or the challenge of it, to hold the tension of what it's like to be in that place, but something pulls him back into what's familiar and what's known for him. So he stays small, he stays safe, and he doesn't take on the challenge of what's next for him. And the thing about this is, it's when you're in it, you do not realize it. You don't notice what's actually happening here, because that's how a complex works. It works within the psyche, it runs autonomously, and it can justify almost anything for you. Okay, so the second complex, the father complex, the push towards your own life. In the individuation process, the modeling of the father is to take the boy out of the mother's comfort and basically put him into reality. And then through that process, also gives him the psychological backing, the backing to go on and say, son, it's now you are your own man, and you have to, I'm not going to be here all the time. It's now time for you to separate from me even. And just as the father complex is formed partly through your dad, it's also formed through the wider masculine field in which you grew up in. There's a lot of things it has a relationship to, but the core things we have to understand here, it's your relationship to authority, it's relationship to structure, it's your push into your own life. It's also the modeling in which your persona or your core identity is going to be based off of as a man. But the big thing, and this is one of the things I've noticed that there's been a lacking of when it comes to modern men, there is a point where it is to step behind you and say, you've got this. You are now have to enter the world as your own man, and just stands behind him and encourages that journey for him to leave the household. And we have to look at this from a psychological level, to leave the psychological household in which was built for that boy to go on and become his own man. And so I'm going to use the example of Good Will Hunting here. It is a phenomenal film. I'd highly recommend you go watch it if this is something you're resonating with, because Will is a janitor. He's brilliant, he's capable, he's smarter than anyone else around him, and he is spending his life mopping the floors and drinking with his friends. He stays in the same neighborhood he grew up in, keeps familiar contacts, and refuses every opportunity to step into his own world, to take on the challenge of his own life. Now, he talks about it as being loyal to his friends, but underneath its regression, he's still inside comfort. He's still inside a world in which he is completely comfortable with, a world in which he has developed that he is the intellectual top dog, so he cannot be challenged. Then Sean, Robbie Williams, he is the therapist that shows up, and he is the symbolic nature of the father. If we separate the two human experiences that are happening in this film, what you can actually see is that Will has now come in contact with his own father complex. He is now redeveloping a better relationship and restructuring what that modeling should have been. Sean doesn't push him with criticism. He doesn't shame him for being a janitor. He simply sees Will as this intelligent guy and holds him to the standards of what it means to have those gifts and to go on and use them in the world. The whole movie from start to finish is actually a brilliant demonstration of the father function in a nutshell. It takes the man out of the comfort of the the mother's world. It also knocks him down a level and takes the grandiose ideas he has about himself and says, well, you're not actually that top dog if you're not doing anything about this. And it's almost like the first time in this man's life where he has now met somebody who is not going to take his shit, who doesn't care how intellectual he is. When he pushes him into the challenge of his own life, when he pushes him to go after the goal and maintain it, then he develops his own internal psychological backing. Because Will can have all these grandiose, large ideas of his life, but there is a level of, I do not trust myself to go on and go do this thing. When the father complex doesn't develop cleanly, that internal backing is missing. And the same pattern that Will displays in the film plays out in most modern men's life. They are phenomenally capable men, and they operate within a structure that's already there. But when it comes to actually taking on the challenge of the next thing, almost the next level for them, whatever that may be, there is just that inability, that psychological backing to go on and do the thing. But usually what I've noticed is there are two common patterns that show up. One of them being the man falls back into the maternal comfort. He can't hold the line, stay with the tension, stay with the hardship that it takes, stay with the reality of the sustained effort it takes to go after the goal. So conviction falls and he falls off a couple of months later, and it could take him 3 or 4 months to actually get back to the point where he was beforehand. I always hear he falls off the bandwagon. There's no internal authority. He hasn't developed a strong enough center, a strong enough eye, which we'll get to in the next part, to say, okay, I can pick myself up here, just like, say, the modeling of a father would. I pick myself up here, brush myself down, mate, you're good, let's go. So when the work gets hard, that's when the mother's gravity within the psyche, the mother's complex, will just win and pull him down. Or what I've also noticed is there's this harsh inner critic that takes place. If there's no internal father whatsoever, an inner critic that I am fundamentally an issue takes place, and it pushes and punishes someone towards the goal to the point that it pushes him past like recovery, rest, and he just burns out, or he does some damage to himself and ends up going backwards. A lot of guys I've noticed just say, that's just the way I am, that's just discipline, and it's not. It's a negative father complex. It's a harsh version of authority that has been inherited on a psychological level that just whips and pushes you towards a goal. And neither of them pull the man into his own life, and neither of them pull the man into what he sets out to achieve. And so he just remains under what Jung calls the parental shadow. Now, the final structure, the ego complex, and this is the I. This is your own center. This is the psychological structure that is meant to do the actual going after the thing you want in life. It's the part of you that says, this is mine, this is what I want, and this is where I'm going. When the developmental work has been done correctly in men, or in the modern men, that I has ground underneath it. Goals are set out from a genuine sense of self. They are not being achieved to prove myself to some ideas in my psyche. They are being pursued from the I within me. And so he can meet the hardship of pursuing these goals with that solid I. When that developmental work hasn't happened, the I doesn't have any real ground, and the goals on some level are coming to prove himself to some ideas within his psyche. Generally, the parental complex within his psyche. They are not there to develop his own sense of self. And so there's no real connection to them, and they stall out the moment anything really requires them. Or in some cases, the goals are genuinely his, but because he hasn't had the psychological backing, the development of his own inner authority, there's no foundation or center to go and pursue them. And from what I've noticed of exploring personal development over the last year, this is where the work entirely misses in modern day. Because yeah, I've even heard death to the ego, transcend the ego, all these sort of things. But the I, every piece of your sense of self, every goal that you have to achieve has to come from that place, and it has to land inside you. It has to be integrated into the I, the ego complex. And then you have to develop this better relationship with these mother and father complexes, especially the father one. I've seen with a lot of modern men is they really have to change the internal relationship they have with their father, because when that changes, then they start to move out of comfort. But if you're in situations where a coach is saying you're self-sabotaging, you're avoiding, that's your shadow talking, or whatever it may be, then you've never really taken on full responsibility of the behavior or the pattern that's rolling, because somebody outside you is still showing you. And accountability and support is all well and good. I'm in groups myself that they're very useful, but the encouragement and the development of your own sense of self, your own I, that own inner authority inside you, that is the ground in which you need to go on and achieve the goals you want to achieve, which is what the rest of this series is about. It's about showing you how the process of separating from the mother complex, from separating from the father complex, owning what's actually yours, developing your own center. And so when you're achieving these goals, now they could be the exact same goals you want, but you're achieving them for yourself, to develop your own sense of self, rather than to prove some illogical ideal that's in your unconscious. So that when you set out to build a goal, when you pursue something that matters to you, when you want to build the life you genuinely want, not the life your parents wanted for you, the life you genuinely want, there's a you behind there. There's a substantial version of this is who I am, this is what I want, and this is where I'm going.